When you asked me to talk about something, a highlight from last year, I automatically went to the issue of modernism, which has intrigued me for such a long time in all that the Trust has been doing. And 2023 really was the year of modernism, certainly in the time I was president at the Trust. And we started with that wonderful news, which Charlotte has in her president's report, that at the beginning of 2023, the New York Times listed New Haven as one of the places to visit in 2023 worldwide, 52 places worldwide to visit. New Haven was one of them. And one of the reasons was modernism. And one of the reasons the modernism was there was because of the New Haven Preservation Trust. So that really set us going. But I am not an architect. I'm a historian, and not an American historian at that. So I was a little daunted by the idea that I should be the person who would talk about modernism. So this is a personal story. It could have been called Modernism and Me, but I wanted to go with modernism and beyond. And really, my knowledge of modernism before I joined the church was really before I joined the trust was really quite limited. Can you bring up the next slide, please? Like everybody who arrives in Connecticut to stay for a while, when we arrived in 2008, we made our way to New Canaan to see Philip Johnston's glass house. It was a beautiful day. It's at a remarkable structure. It's in such amazing grounds, that incredible sense, that transparency, that lightness, what you can do with glass and metal and wood inside. And the whole setting is quite remarkable and really aesthetically unbelievably pleasing. But the other side of modernism that I discovered as I arrived in New Haven, next slide please, was the whole debate over what was happening at Church Street South. The houses built by Charles Moore, Dean of the School of Architecture at the time. The original plan, my understanding was to have Mies van der Rohe build luxury accommodation, but it became lower income housing, and it was designed as something particular to its age. But by the time I arrived, the reports were all about the court cases, about the fact that former residents were suing because of mold and illness that had been caused. And of course, now when you exit the station, there is nothing there because this whole area has been demolished and deemed unlivable. So those two sides of modernism were very much what I had in mind as I came to the Trust. When I arrived at the Trust, it was just, could you have the next slide, please? The Trust was celebrating an award that it had just received for its really remarkable New Haven Modern website. If you haven't been to it, I thoroughly encourage you to go and explore all the information, the images that are available on this website. It's a remarkable resource. It's also a very attractive and easily explored resource. And I thought this was quite tremendous in initiating me into what modernism was in New Haven. And of course, there were many other ways in which over the next few years, the Trust celebrated modernism. We had, for example, the talk on the Harvard Five that left a real mark on me. Recently, you'll have seen the social media posts on modernist dwellings. In 2021, we had the awards all went to modernist structures, celebrating the anniversary of the Trust. They were all buildings related to 1961, Newhall Gardens, Condé West Magnet School, and the Fire Station headquarters. But the other element that really left its mark on me were the Trust tours, and in particular two. Next slide, please. And these were two tours I went on of buildings I would not have been in otherwise. One was Crawford Manor, and that the very fact we could be in the building, we were in the apartments within the building, and we also had a chance to talk to residents who really enjoyed living in this space. And as it was explained to me, I began to really warm to the ideas behind a structure like this. And then I also had the opportunity to go on a Trust tour of what is now Hotel Marcel, but was at that stage the Pirelli building, the Armstrong Rubber building, which was empty. A few people ventured up from the ground floor where they were not meant to, but there was opportunity. As we toured this remarkable space, I began to get a whole new sense of what a modernist structure was, even to be in it. And it really got me thinking about modernism differently. This is what the Trust had done for me. Next slide, please. And in particular, I always think of, I think it's 195 Church Street. Many of you will know it with different names, as it seems to have been through just about every bank ownership, even in the time we've been here. It currently has Key Bank in it, who also have our mortgage. So I have been in this building too. But it was a member of the Trust who pointed out, showed me how to look at this building, how to see the reflections in it, the shapes in it, the angles, the height, the colour, and what it actually adds to New Haven Green, not simply detracting from the older structures that survive, or the facade of the City Hall in this case. So that was me. That was kind of my knowledge of modernism through the Trust. Last year became, as I said, the year of modernism for me at the Trust. And the great event that happened was our relationship with Docomomo US. Can we bring up the next slide? So Docomomo US is a national organization, I believe actually an international organization. This is the US branch of it, whose mission is to push boundaries to preserve modern architecture, landscapes, and design through principled advocacy, collaboration, and celebration. So it does for modernist architecture perhaps what we try to do with all architecture in New Haven. And we have a long-standing relationship with Docomomo. Members of our organization have been on events organized by Docomomo outside New Haven. And we also the Trust always participates in Tour Day with a modernist tour at the beginning of October. It's Docomomo Tour Day. But in 2023, actually in 2022, the organization decided to bring its massive annual symposium to New Haven. And the Trust became a collaborator with that project, along with organizations such as the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, and Preservation Connecticut. Now, the Trust can't give money, but what it can do is give tremendous expertise and energy and hours to staging something like this that raises up one of the great qualities of New Haven's architecture, its modernist structures. And that's exactly what we sought to do. I think it was quite clear from the beginning there were really two reasons that they were coming here. One was its remarkable heritage in modernist architecture, but also, next slide please, the pizza. It was remarkable how at every meeting people mentioned New Haven pizza. And in fact, one of the practical donations we made was in time, in that I transported 40 pizzas from Modern Pizza to York Street. And I can tell you, if you transport 40 pizzas, your car will smell of pizza for some time to come. But we were very involved, as this suggests, in the groundwork in getting this event to happen. One of the things we did was we ensured, next slide please, that each participant, each attender at the symposium had in the bag that they received a copy of our New Haven Modern Architecture Top 25, which we updated for the event. So it is the truth that some modernist structures have not survived or have been altered, and they were therefore eliminated from the top 25, and new candidates were brought in. So this is a brochure that's been very popular whenever we attend events. Many people like to pick this up and peruse it, and are quite amazed at its contents and the number of modernist and structures in New Haven that are so attractive. So that was one thing we did. We also took up one of the great strengths of the Trust, which is in holding tours with real experts who are really able to communicate that knowledge on the ground, literally, to attenders at the tours. So we were able, 4 people in particular, did tours that we helped organize. Could we bring up the next slide? So here you see Ming Thompson, who was a board member at the time, and she did a tour, 2 tours, I believe, of Yale's most iconic modernist architecture. Here she is in the Yale museum. Next slide. And here we see Mike Waters, who is vice president at the trust. And he also took 2 tours, one on a bus, one on foot, around the Prospect Hill neighbourhood, arranging to see many of these remarkable private structures, and using all his connections to make sure that the tours could really touch the modernist structures themselves. Then we had, next slide, please, Channing Harris, a long-term board member at the Trust, a frequent tour guide who really uses his knowledge so well. And he put together a very innovative tour that took people through Government Centre and the Audubon Arts District, talking there in particular about postmodern structures in that space. And as you can see, it was on a hot day. And then finally, next slide, we have Chris Wiegren. Now, Chris Wiegren, who I hope is here this evening, is, of course, with Preservation Connecticut, but we like to claim him as one of our own because he's on our Preservation Committee. And he did a wonderful tour of Worcester Square, looking at how the historic buildings and preserved buildings of Worcester Square sit alongside some remarkable modernist structures like the Condé West School that got an award in 2021. These were the major tours. It was also clear to us from the beginning that if we were going to work with Docomomo, it had to be in line with the mission that the Trust sees for itself within New Haven. And that mission involves not just raising up the great monuments of architecture, whether they're in Hillside Avenue or Yale buildings, including Yale modernist structures like the Yale Whale or the Museum of British Art or the School of Architecture. But it had to be a relationship with New Haven that reflected our interest in making sure that all communities were represented and all stories were told. And on that count, we were so proud to be able to organize, not to host, but to organize an event that was part of the symposium, that was a community event in that it was for symposium guests and for local residents and for members of the Trust at Dixwell Community Church. I think the next slide, could I have the next slide, please? Part of this event was to actually produce more materials, and our wonderful communications committee came up with 2 particularly fine examples. One is a self-guided walking tour of urban renewal in the Dixwell neighbourhood. This is the front cover of it. It's still available, I believe, and that you can then walk around the Dixwell neighbourhood for yourself to see and have explained to you some of the modernist structures, part of our urban renewal in that neighbourhood. And the second publication, if we can call it that we made. Next slide. The second publication was a whole array of boards telling the story of urban renewal in the Dixwell neighbourhood. And these boards, these are 3 examples, but these boards were then displayed on the evening itself within the church when we held the event. Next slide. And here then is the event inside. I think this is, to me, one of the most exciting pictures we could have of last year. This is us within the church, these 3 groups, community members, Trust members, symposium attendees, at this talk. And the talk was given, the primary speaker was the wonderful Charles Warner Jr., who is an active member of the community, of the church, of this community, and also a remarkable historian of the era, of the place and the era that we were talking about. And he gave us the most remarkable account of what urban renewal was for this neighbourhood, both its positive visionary thinking, but also its impact on the neighbourhood that was already there. The need for investment, he explained to us, was great. The communities were ready for the problems of the area to be tackled. But in many ways, modernism was not entirely the answer. In some ways it was, in some ways it was not. And it was a really heartfelt, but that's not fair. It was also incredibly learned talk about this subject. And as the cherry on the pie was then the fact that we were so delighted that Ed Cherry, who attended. Ed Cherry was, I believe, the first Black architect to be chartered in the state of Connecticut. And he was very involved in the work that was done in the Dixwell neighborhood, including the old Q house, which has just been demolished. And we asked him if he would come along and just be present and be somebody that people might talk to. But Ed was willing to stand up and talk himself a little about his experiences as architect of this region, this area. It was truly a remarkable event, and I almost hugged, I did not hug, but I almost hugged the member of the symposium who, when leaving, said to me this was the best event that they had attended over the 3 days. It was truly a delight. Could I have the next slide, please? I apologize that this is the only slide we have of this nature, and everybody is actually looking at me. That was not deliberate. But this is because here's a picture of Charles Warner Jr., our presenter, Ed Cherry, architect, and two of the most giving people to this event. We say here, Karen Krochmal and Jean Pogwitz, two members of the trust who gave I think I'm unmuted, am I? Yes. So Jean takes wonderful pictures, photographs. She is also extremely knowledgeable about New Haven, and she is also one of our fellow pizza deliverers for this occasion, which just gives you a sense of the breadth of her involvement. And Karen Krochmal, who's also in the picture, she has chaired a communications committee. She is a liaison with Docomomo. She is a graphic designer who makes much of what we do look the way it does. I will say she's also the person who told me how to look at 195 Church Street, that building that we looked at earlier. And she's also the person who told me the next time I was in Vienna, I had to go and visit a brutalist church on its outskirts, which I did and was truly worth the visit. So I wanted to have them in this image so that we can also appreciate all that they have done. So yes, let's bring up the final video, the final slide. And this is where I want to leave you. This is Ed Cherry, the architect. And Ed recently recorded an interview for the Trust, which is now available has been available since 2023 on the Trust website. And I would really recommend that you go and look at it to get a sense of what modernism and the people, and that's my beyond. The beyond is the people, the energies, the vision that all sits alongside the structures themselves. And very strikingly, you'll hear Ed talk in this video about designing the Q house that he and Herb Newman were involved in designing. You'll remember right at the beginning that image of the glass house. It's transparent. You need to be willing to be looked in upon, and you need to have the confidence to look out. It's a position of vulnerability that suggests that you have the confidence to be in that space. And it's also the case that if you hear about the parties and the events that were held at Philip Johnston's house, you would be invited once, and if you performed well enough, you might be invited back. But if you didn't, you were not selected to be part of that space. In this video, you will hear Ed Cherry say specifically, he did not design a glass house. He could not design a glass house because nobody could risk looking out on a New Haven that was burning. And you'll also hear him say that it was a space for everyone. It was a community space. And it strikes me that that's very different from the glass house, that these are two forms of modernism that are just very distinct. And that's really the note I want to end us on today. I think that we have these remarkable buildings, but the beyond is to allow ourselves to be challenged by them, to learn from them, and also to preserve them. Thank you very much. Thanks.